point, I believe, we're going to introduce our morning speaker. She says she's going to give us some comments, some talk, and speak briefly, but she wants to hear your questions primarily. Before she gets up, though, I have to read your fabulous resume, which she says is the shortest job resume that there is. And she graduated from Cornell University, which is in the southern tier of New York State in 1976, and then started the Sandpaper publication on Long Island. I love the name of that. It sounds like, you know, you're rubbing things the wrong way or stirring things up. But maybe Long Island was just a little too tame for her, Patty, and she came to Denver in 1977, where she co-founded Westward. Please correct your agenda. She is co-founder of the Westward. Most of you know that Westward is one of those avant-garde publications that comes out weekly and talks about all the great pot shops and best restaurants. So she has a lot of accolades too. For 3 decades, she's been a regular on the Colorado Inside Out. That's PBS's 12's weekly roundtable. She's one of the National Society of Professional Journalists Awards, and for featuring and column writing, as well as the Golden Quill. That's not the only thing she's gotten awards from. She is on the Hall of Fame for the Colorado Press Association and the Colorado Restaurant Association Hall of Fame. Maybe that's because once a year they publish the best restaurants in Denver. And she says they're not nice most of the time, but this one week of the year they're nice. And that gives you a clue to her humor, isn't it great? And so they probably inducted her into the Hall of Fame, you know, for their own purposes. Well, anyway, the Denver Press Club Hall of Fame and the Association of Alternative News Weeklies Hall of Fame. As past president of that association, she once interviewed President Bill Clinton while wearing flip-flops. Oh, and she's also played an actual journalist in John Sayles' Silver City. So, I'm now glad to introduce you, Patty, to the League of Women Voters of Denver.
I'm sure that's great. So, I'll just hold it. I will occasionally refer to the speech that I'm going to mostly ignore. The Restaurant Hall of Fame, Jeanette, just to clear it up, was because of my bar tab. It was not. And also, I have to clarify, so we started as a weekly paper, but we're a 24/7 website now, and in fact, I've posted 2 stories while sitting here. None of them exciting. But the Rosemary 88 Drive-In has reopened, if you care about that. Tradition, 49th season. So, as Jeanette said, I'm happy to hear what you want to talk about. I'm always most interested in that, rather than what I think. I never stay on the same page unless I'm literally on the page written, so ask me anything and feel free to interrupt at any time. I know this speech at one point was billed as an hour, but no one gives a speech for an hour unless it's David Koppel on Colorado Inside Out. So I'm happy to talk about that. You've heard about my shortest resume. I have to tell you, it wasn't Long Island, it was Long Beach Island in New Jersey, and I fled really quickly to come out to Colorado, where I'd skied a lot, and that was the sum total of our market survey. I said after college, let's go start a newspaper because it would be so easy. And the reason I have a short resume is I've never actually produced one, except for a lot of Ivy League students. I worked in the secretarial pool. You may remember what that was. Typing on pre-IBM Selectrics. We had to type resumes for lying students, I can tell you that. without an error, so I'm a pretty good typist, which I could fall back on someday if I had to. All right, so as I said, I'm always interested in what you're thinking about and what's new right now. And we started Westward largely because Denver seems so much more interesting than the mainstream dailies made it look. And I'm happy to report that Denver still is more interesting than the media makes it look. So I'm always looking at ways to bring the story home. I can tell you today we were talking at this table about the Pope. I haven't figured out a way to look the Pope into Denver yet. And the Pulitzer, I haven't figured that out either. But we were talking about how both the Pope and James, the Pulitzer novelist, were unlikely winners. They weren't the official finalists. So, but I can't really come up with a story that's going to work for us. I was thinking about Pakistan and the India ceasefire this morning. The fact that Leo might have been chosen just to piss off Trump, which I love. That the mayor of Newark was just arrested outside a GEO facility, if you heard that. You know, we of course have a GEO facility in Aurora where people, maybe some of you, have been protesting every Monday night. Originette Vizuera, who was, you know, a Time Magazine of the Year person in 2017 when she sought sanctuary. Was she in this church? I can't remember. But now she is under lock and key at the GEO Group facility. Also, there's a Honduran mother there who was arrested at Buckley delivering a DoorDash delivery. So that's a story we will get into. Judge Jean Pirro is now going to be the U.S. Temporary Attorney in D.C. I mean, you can't make this up. She's at least better than Ed Martin, who had been the interim nominee, who defended the January 6th insurrectionists who liked to dress as Adolf Hitler. The insurrectionists, not sure if Martin did. But anyway, that I think we can bring home back to the heroic Coloradans who sued to keep Trump off the primary ballot here. Didn't work, but it went all the way to the Supreme Court, which is great. So with things moving so fast, it's more important than ever to be in the media, I think. We also have more challenges than ever, and they're not even the economic challenges, which completely suck. And I can talk about that too. I have noticed probably more this year than ever before that commentary is very uncivil for readers or pretend readers. I'm sure you hear it all the time. Never have I gotten angrier comments and calls and letters to the editor, but also never have I gotten as many encouraging comments too, so that's good. I went to the Trump rally in Aurora in October. Any of you there? Which was fascinating. It also made me realize he was going to win the election, which was scary. But we saw 10,000 people there. There was a little media corral, and I was sitting there, and actually people were very friendly. I got out the night before. I was at the Gaylord, because I thought I will never get there in the traffic the next day, since, you know, 2 lanes to get there. And everyone at the bar, yes, the bar, was really nice at Gaylord, all Trumpers, MAGA people, but everyone was very friendly. They loved Colorado. And then the next day, when we're in the room, in our little journalism corral, surrounded by 10,000 people, and people are getting tired. I think Trump came in about 4 hours in. And before that, people are livening up the crowd, and Trump starts talking about getting licenses for CBS and maybe pulling licenses for the New York Times and going after the media. And it got a little ugly, like the people right next to us started talking about defunding the media. And I had to say, you know, we're not funded by you. Which they didn't like. So anyway, it's been, it has gotten definitely worse than it used to be. We're having there's a national convention in town. We're having a safety in the newsroom whole program on Thursday because it's gotten so bad. I've had to hire people to protect staff writers who've been nervous. Frankly, you know, the people who don't know the best of are more likely to be violent with us, but we've done it. The comment posts, as I said, are getting really ugly. So that's just the climate. You also have access to information is tough. We just saw the Colorado legislature want to push a bill that would give less access for people. So fortunately, that is stopped for now. You've got the threat of lawsuits coming from Trump on CBS, on almost everyone else. and you see people caving, which is also bad. You have public media that is definitely being defunded. Colorado Public Television, where I am, it was probably going to lose 5% of their funding. CPR is losing funding, so that's tough. Sorry, this is freezing.
They're doing a drive right now.
Yeah, oh, I heard it.
It's hard to
As I
get.
drove up. In fact, everyone's doing drives. I could admit we are doing a drive, and we're not even public. But we're private, but I can say our new membership campaign, we started 6 years ago accepting memberships, even though we're a free paper, and it's paid for a newsroom writer every year. So that's pretty great, but everyone is desperate because there's no advertising out there anymore, really, for media. If you look at the Denver Post, there is no Rocky Mountain News. It's tough. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was, even at the same time, people are making it difficult to get information from the government, although I have gotten 5 texts from the White House this morning. Not really personal, I got on the list back when I went to Aurora, but they got a lot to say today. The internet, while they can also reach us, it's given you more voice, which is great. You've got ways to put up your meetings, you've got ways to put up your opinions, you've got ways to put up columns. That's great, more access. On the other hand, fake news is coming our way all the time, and we spend a lot of time just combating that and the fake news that's out there. I think the one I was chasing yesterday, did you see the letter that was sent to Harvard from the Secretary of Education? Well, then there's a corrected version of that letter, not from her, but it's really good. So I was going to talk about past speeches, since none of you have interrupted me yet, but feel free. The questions I always got asked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when will the Denver newspaper war end? Remember that? Wasn't that lovely? To have 2 big papers every day that I could make fun of and you could read. We didn't know how good we had it. 2009, that's when we lost the Rocky Mountain News on its 150th anniversary year. The other question, how can you give your paper away? I will say this is a good development, the access to free media, which the internet made respectable. When we started Westward, we were referred to as a shopper or the thrifty nickel, if you remember those. So the battle to prove that a free paper can have value has been really, it's been won, which is good. And the internet then kept pushing it. How often do you get peeved when you get a paywall? So you won't get that at Westward. You'll get a lot of pie-hats, but you won't get paywalls. How often have you been sued? I'm happy to say that answer has never changed in the last 40 years. We've been sued once. And so that was good. What's Peter Boyle's really like? People don't ask me that as much as they used to now that he's not on Channel 12, but he is on the radio right now on 7:10 a.m. And the all-time question I've always gotten asked is, do your personals really work? Some of you in here might know the answer to that. I can say I was at a dinner party with people I had never met before about 2 weeks ago, and one of the couples had met through a Westward personal 15 years before, which is great. But we don't have them anymore. You can blame the internet for that too, and swiping and Tinder and everything else. So a lot has changed, but some things haven't. I'm going to talk about a couple of the stories we've been chasing over the years. Rocky Flats. When we started Westward, people were protesting over nuclear weapons. That seems, well, maybe that goes down, we'll see. But so protesting at Rocky Flats back in '78, Daniel Ellsberg was there. You can remember what the action was like. Ultimately, Rocky Flats was closed down, not because of politics, but because of environment. There was that big raid in 1989 because of plutonium problems. And back in the 70s, you actually had to, I can't remember who pushed this through, but if you were looking at buying a place near Rocky Flats, realtors had to warn you that it was a plutonium processing plant. Now, of course, Candelas is like pushing right up by the side of it, and it is a refuge anyone can go on. But it's cleaner. So we're continuing to write about that because various Northwestern municipalities, any of you are in the suburbs where they're not paying to build the road around Rocky Flats to finish the loop. So that's actually back in the news again. The Sand Creek Massacre is a story I've been writing about a lot, not about the massacre that was 159 years ago, but about the fact that it hadn't been taught in schools, it had been pretty much swept under the rug. You might remember the Civil War monument at the Capitol, which was toppled during 2020. Actually, at one point had a mention that Sand Creek was a Civil War battle, not a massacre. So that had been changed, and that was great. But I mean, even Congress, in the middle of the Civil War, did investigations that determined it was a massacre. So the Sand Creek massacre fight keeps going on, but sooner or later, where that Civil War soldier stood will be a monument to the indigenous tribes, specifically the Arapaho and the Cheyenne. That passed this year, unless someone tries to stop it, which could happen. I've been writing another story, and if anyone happens to be really good at dealing with health issues, this is another story that I'm fascinated by, right under your nose, and you don't think it could happen in Denver. There were 2 kids who, this was about half a mile from my house in Northwest Denver, 2 kids were dropped off at a drug dealer's by their mother, twins who were 8. And they were imprisoned in this house for 10 years, boy and girl. The girl had 4 children by her imprisoner. Her brother was kept out in a pit out back. They finally escaped. They finally went to trial. The guy, the rapist, 350 years in prison. But these kids are still trying to get their lives back together. Now they're almost 40. But if anyone happens to know, the boy needs a lot of dental work. So if anyone happens to know a good opportunity, I told them I'd talk to them this afternoon. Finally, one of the things that's obsessed me, obviously, elections. Are you kidding? Donald Trump on Monday is calling Tina Peters a political prisoner? Because a Colorado jury dared to convict her. So that story is not going to go away soon. Congratulations on pushing the Voting Act, but we still see that election deniers out there. You still see John Eastman, who see you paid money to be, I keep wanting to come back to him, paid money to be a conservative voice, as though any voice from any political party just is going to be a label and be fine. This is a man who basically came up with the theory that they could take the White House back over in 2020 because they just needed a little cooperation from Pence. So just incredible stories out there. Tina Peters, and then also in Mesa County, no one from Mesa County here, you have the people who just decided to take some votes, some ballots, and have just been convicted of that too. So it's crazy. If we can't make it look like our voting is secure, and if we can't keep access like mail-in voting, which is, I think has been so important in Colorado, these are fights that we are going to keep fighting here. So those are all issues that are obsessing me at the moment. Tell me what direction you'd like to go in. Media, politics, yeah.
How's our mayor doing?
That is a good question. All right. Denver lost its mojo, no question, during the pandemic and maybe a little bit before. Michael Hancock stayed in office way too long. People didn't feel they knew what was going on in the city, even before the pandemic development. So I have to say, Johnston was very upfront when he ran with, 17 people, about wanting to solve the homelessness issue, which was a big concern on everybody's mind at the time. And then, of course, the migrants came in, which made it really a difficult problem. I think he now is really kind of on his feet. I don't know if you've noticed, he's out much more in public than he used to be. He's meeting with people. He's working on some other issues. I think giving a raise to the cabinet right now might be a really bad idea when we know that the budget's in so much trouble. But I've been impressed with him lately. And the migrant issue is a tough one. Denver has always been a city that cared about people. Not necessarily people who were already here, but wanted to be a welcoming city. So I'm not sure what I would have done differently about migrants, or what any good mayor would have done differently, but we're gonna be tightening our belts for a while, not just because of that. Yeah.
Could you speak to what you think of our senators?
Oh.
Okay, well, Hickenlooper was my bartender. So, when he was co-founder of the Wine Coup, our office was across the street, and as he will sometimes tell you in his equally unscripted speeches, we kept him in business, whether you like that or not, for a long time because our deadline day was the slowest day in the bar business, so we would just all go across the street and kept them alive for a couple of years. I think it's really interesting that he decided to go that final direction in the Senate. He didn't think he was suited for it because he really liked being able to be as bossy as he could be, as first the mayor and as the governor. But I think he's really enjoying the collegiality, if you can call it that, in Congress. I think it's interesting that both he and Bennett are in some ways the more conservative of the Democrats, but I also like that they talk to both sides. And Bennett right now, I think, is really known for that. He's a little, it'll be interesting. I think he'd be a good governor. I don't know what's gonna happen with him and Weiser, but I like it that Bennett is thoughtful. Kind of the accidental senator. No one ever thought he would be in the Senate, but he's done a pretty good job. And if you go, Beth, you probably have a better idea. If you go outside Denver, people really know Michael Bennett because he has gone to every county numerous times to be sure he talks to people. So I don't know where that'll go. Yeah.
What about the idea of suspending parts of the Constitution, like habeas corpus?
Well, I think you can guess I'm not in favor of it.
I got too close.
Okay. It's appalling. I mean, can you believe it? When you, even I think the Supreme Court's appalled. Even the judges that were appointed by Trump are appalled. So we'll see what happens. But the actions of the judges, so most of the judges so far, have been really impressive. But yeah, crazy. And this is all going to come up. I couldn't say it last night on TV. Let me see if I get it right tonight. Alien Enemies Act. Thank you. Got them backwards. I mean, really, that people are using that again when we, last used to intern the Japanese Americans. It's appalling. So we'll see. Let's put some hope in the Supreme Court. And I wouldn't have thought I'd said that a year ago. But, yeah.
On the Supreme Court, is there an enforcement means outside of the U.S. Marshal Service to basically hold them in contempt? Like, what does that look like for a disagreement between the executive and the Supreme Court at that juncture?
I wish I knew. I mean, you would hope the military and the Marshal Service would recognize what their duty is, which is to the Constitution, but it's hard to know. I mean, as we see things, I will say we see incredible acts of heroism around the country with people who are defying orders and doing what they think is right. So we would hope that the masses would also rise up. People have talked about David Brooks, that the good of the American people would triumph. But who knows? Because we've also seen who voted in November. Yeah, in the back?
Any advice in terms of understanding what is a distraction versus what is going to cause real harm?
That is really a great question because Trump is a master at distracting people. He, you will chase after a thing like, I'll chase after the Tina Peters thing when he can't do anything, allegedly, about Tina Peters. So he will turn things really quickly. What you've got to do is find people you believe in, websites you believe in, get as much information as you can from people you think are trustworthy. And sometimes you just have to do a lot of searching. The great thing about the internet, you've got access to so much, but you also have access to crap. And I'm just going to do a very quick Trump story, which is, I'm from Chicago originally. Believe it or not, my brother was in a barbershop quartet. One of his quartet members went on to NBC and became the director of entertainment, who hired Donald Trump for The Apprentice. Did anyone read the story this guy wrote in October about apologizing to the American people because he said, I took a washed-up blowhard who was a failed businessman, but I knew he'd be great on TV. And he created Donald Trump basically with The Apprentice. Now, I think apologizing in October was a little late. And I said, I haven't seen the guy in 50 years, but I'm like, a little late for that. But Trump is so good at distracting us, and it's kind of the TV time in our brains. Yeah, sorry.
Back to local Denver, as much as I would like to stay with you, speaking about Trump. The soccer center that has been proposed has met immediate rejection by city council because of the cost of just getting the land ready to be built on. I took one of the city council people aside a week or so ago and said, this has got to happen. Do you have a comment on that? The soccer thing has to happen, especially at that corner, which is just horrible.
I would agree. We're pro women's soccer and the project probably until we find out who might be making money off it. But remember what we did for Elitch's. You know, we all campaigned. We paid money to bring Elitch's downtown. We paid for that infrastructure. That was an amusement park. And now it's going to Cronky and Company, which will be building the River Mile along there. I think to bring things to the Gates area, which has been promised development for 30 years, and I'm not saying big, icky apartment complexes like we're seeing everywhere, but actually amenities like finishing the bridge, putting in the parks, putting in the roads. So I think of all the projects we're hearing about, that could be one of the greatest goods. So they have to look at the amount of money because it was also originally announced as though it would be such a boon and no one would be paying. Well, of course the city always winds up paying. I mean, you look at the South Platte, you've got the National Western, which now wants to do a whole equestrian center and arena. Then you keep going down and you've got Ball Arena, which wants to put in another amphitheater and more housing. And then you've got the River Mile, and probably Bronco Stadium will go, and that'll be another development. And you go all the way down to Gates. That one's looking pretty good at this point, because it's where there isn't a concentration of development, and I think people down there could use it. Yeah.
Coming back to another local issue, and the election that brought Johnson into power as mayor. League supports ranked choice voting, and we are with a consortium group that's making a proposal to City Council to again consider ranked choice voting for municipal elections. Any thoughts about ranked choice voting or doing an article on that?
It makes my head hurt. You know, well, it turned out, and we didn't even know it because they were even pushing it. One of our former writers also pushed the whole ranked choice voting, Ryan Ross, and he wrote an essay for us that we ran. I'm nervous about it, just in the sense if you have 17 people running, how is it really going to work out? I'm willing to look at it seriously, and we have written about it, and we will look at it again. But in some places it's worked wonderfully, and in others it hasn't. So happy to look at it.
We have people you can talk to.
Sure, well, I'm pretty sure you do.
There's limiting on it.
Okay, yes.
Back to local politics, I don't think I need that. I'm using my teacher voice. Anyway, what do you think about BRT, the Kofax renovation that I live in 2 blocks from, and how it's affecting local businesses? And do you think that Kofax Avenue, my favorite street, is ever going to be anything but seedy?
Well, yes, it's going to be empty because of the So, you know, this is one, I've had many arguments over the years with people who want me to take up causes. Like one person really wanted me to fight to move I-70 when it was expanded away from where it was. And it's like, that's just never going to happen. But last fall I thought, can we stop the BRT before it starts? Because it's so bad. And what my big panic is, not only is it so bad right now, but what happens when the feds pull the rest of the money? I mean, the fact that it's allegedly funded doesn't mean the grant money's coming, as anyone at the NEA or NEH or National Sciences can tell you now. So it is a concern, a huge concern, and it's a mess. And I feel bad for those businesses, which have always been scrappy little smoke shops and bars, and they've made it on their own, and then they get screwed over. I mean, they've never really asked for a handout, so it's a mess. And inspired by the fact that I didn't do that, I'm now trying to stop the Civic Center renovation for at least a year. And I actually talked to the mayor about this. He said, do you really think people are tired of construction? It might have been disrespectful, but I said, are you cracked? Of course they are. He said, we still don't even have them all back. We don't know if them all will work. And you were talking about closing Civic Center Park this year. So we've already moved Chris Kendall Market, and we just, finished Cinco, and there may be nothing more after Pride. And I said, are you kidding? Like, give it a year. Let us celebrate Colorado's 150th in Civic Center. Let us enjoy maybe having them all back. Let us at least have 3 blocks of Colfax. And give us a break. But it's horrible, and I don't know what businesses can possibly survive. Yeah.
As a longtime journalist, I'm just curious your thoughts on kind of this shift towards like influencers and kind of the impact that they have, and especially on a society that seems to kind of want to believe what they want to believe in their echo chambers, and how do you, I guess, combat that like in a journalism world?
Well, the only way you can combat it is actually do journalism, which I would say most influencers don't, but we see the effects all the time. And it's horrifying. I'll say, you've always had blowhard political columnists and opinion makers, and that's not all that different from influencers now. But in coverage of restaurants, for example, and in business services, it's really bad. So I'll give you an example. Our food editor is out on medical leave, and so I've had to, I'm doing her job right now on a lot of this, and all of a sudden you see, it used to be strict standards, like you would go pay for a review meal, you would do it anonymously, you would just go to an event and suck up to whatever they said. And the influencer invitations coming out all the time, they don't even try to court food journalists, not that there are many journalists in Denver anymore, which you probably also have noticed. But the influencers are who the restaurants have to reach if they're going to create any kind of buzz. And the influencers just go, get a free meal, maybe get paid, and write a story.
And do you see that spreading beyond verticals like restaurant and lifestyle?
Oh yeah, it's amazing what we get offered. I was laughing, I got offered $2,000 for 2 weeks of pushing a beer, and I looked and I'm like, oh my God, this is even the beer I drink. I didn't know that. I didn't do it.
I have a related follow-up question. Given the fact that so many people are getting their quote-unquote news from social influencers or media, social media, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, how do we embrace that and work with that when we think about trying to educate voters?
It is so tricky. I mean, I like that the legislature and other people are pushing for media literacy in schools and trying to show people what actual journalism is. YouTube now is maybe the main source of news for a lot of people, and as you know, YouTube is not exactly vetted. So support the things you like. I mean, I can't believe it, but the Denver Post now, if you get a subscription, it's over $1,000 a year. They have a staff that's, 1/5 the size it used to be, but it's still better than nothing. I read the Gazette every day. You wonder how long that will keep going with Phil Anschutz, but still, better than nothing, even though I don't agree with a lot of what they do. So we have to keep telling people what's the difference between real journalism and not. And I'm worried about the younger generation that isn't learning it. On the other hand, I think about it when we started Westward and we had younger readers and not many older readers. You didn't have a lot necessarily, but you had people who cared and they had influence with their peers, but the kind of influence you want. Like, really, you can read real news stories. And I think maybe that group is coming again. we have a lot of younger readers, even though we've got them all over the map, but younger readers are coming. We lure them in with pot and music, but they still.
When do you think we will elect our first woman governor, and who do you think that will be?
Oh, please, no.
God. You're kidding.
Yeah, how depressing is that? Let's see, I don't know offhand who I think it'll be right now. I mean, when you look at who's up and coming, I mean, I would hope we would find someone who could speak for the whole state, which would be great because of how rural areas feel like they're left out. But the real powerhouses obviously are in Denver, so I don't have a name for you yet. I would like to have a woman mayor, but I don't have that name yet either. Yeah.
In this last state legislative session, what was the most surprising to you and what was the best?
The most surprising, although it shouldn't have been, is this whole AI kerfuffle that came up. You know, if you followed it until the very, very end Monday night, when the move to try to get a bill through almost stopped everything. And you know that, so back the previous session, there was a bill put through to kind of regulate AI. Polis hates it, tech hates it. It is, as I said last night, and I'll just crib myself, it's like regulating a horse and buggy when we're all in really, really fast cars now. How much things have changed in just a year. But on the other hand, Polis and other people could have started writing that bill earlier and trying to push it through earlier. So we now have an obsolete bill going up February 1, unless it becomes part of the special session. So that was one of the surprises. I also have to say another one. They fight, and it was really ugly, over the minimum tipped wage. I don't know how much, if you're involved in restaurants, if you know people who are, but that became so ugly on both sides, and you wouldn't necessarily think so, it's restaurants. But that has been a really ugly fight, and it's not going to be over yet. Let's see, what was I happy about? Voting rights?
Thank you.
Definitely, gold standard, so I'll go with that.
Thank you.
And I think maybe construction defects, if it does anything, that we finally got something through again.
How is that going to safeguard people who move in to a complex, a multifamily dwelling?
Well, I would hope that the government in its permitting has already done the job, which gets into another issue if you look at Denver permitting. So there seem to be some safeguards in there, but we'll see. The last one didn't work, and the last one went the other way, really. It just didn't get people into condos, bad or good. Yeah, Beth.
I'd like to make a comment. Patty has mentioned Tina Peters several times. This year, the League of Women Voters of Colorado has chosen as our 2025 Leaders of Democracy Attorney General Phil Weiser and District Attorney Dan Rubenstein for their successful prosecution and for standing up for democracy. June 20th, Joseph Corbell Center at DU. Tickets on sale now.
No, and that's really a good point. And the fact that, I mean, if you look, Lauren Boebert actually said that Rubenstein was doing a good job before she jumped districts. Yeah, she's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I think. So it's a little bit beyond my circulation area, but she's got that bit of Douglas County, so we've got an excuse. Douglas County, another one that we'll have to be following in the new year.
Yes.
Anything else? Yeah.
I just am upset by the euphemisms disinformation and misinformation. What happened to the word lies?
Okay, let me start by being charitable first. Sometimes you really don't know. And I would say to use that Harvard letter example, so there is no question, the letter went out to Harvard on Monday. But people I know who are very smart sent me the corrected letter and said, isn't this funny what Harvard did? And so it's very hard to tell now what's real and what isn't. No, there always are people who have just lied through their teeth and know it and don't care. The problem is now it gets disseminated and people can't figure out the difference. So it's really difficult. And it's gonna become worse with AI and how you can rig photos. I'm sure we all saw Trump made himself the Pope. So, it's, yeah.
What are your favorite news sources when you take time to read?
Okay, in the morning, let's see, in the morning I go through, depends on when I get up. I'm at the moment staying with my 96-year-old mother, so I have a lot of time in the morning. I skim through the Denver Gazette, the Denver Post, Colorado Newsline, Axios, CityCast, Denverite, and those are the local ones that I go through. Some CPR, but that's Denverite too. So, and then if I have time, I read the Washington Post and the New York Times. Hey, you can skim a lot faster on a computer than you could when you were turning pages.
What about the Colorado Sun?
I consider the Colorado Sun kind of like my New Yorker when I have more time, because they're not so much a paper of record. They're really great long reads. So I love Jesse Paul though. I mean, I like a lot of their people and I'll read them. But we don't really aggregate, but the good news is some of the ones I just listed do. So they'll have the Colorado Sun story I should read. Yeah.
Speaking of the Washington Post, excuse me, speaking of the Washington Post and the New York Times, not so much the New York Times, but these large one-man newspapers like the Gazette that has started to do a lot of personal influence. I mean, in the beginning, Bezos kept his hands off the Washington Post, but now he's inserting more influence on what's being published.
Well, you know, there's the old line, freedom of the press belongs to those who can buy one. And Bezos did. If you looked, for example, the Pulitzer Prize went to a cartoonist who quit the Washington Post because of the Bezos influence. It's horrifying. We've lived through it with Rupert Murdoch, sort of. We have thanked him for Fox. But what you hope for is that you get a lot of young world citizen journalists who can now put up their own stories. But you have to read 1,000 to get the influence of the Washington Post. So it's bad, but I don't know what we're going to be able to do about it. Yeah.
So you've been in business here from the time Colorado was more red and then more purple, and now nationally looking like it's more blue. Can you comment on what it was like to write the paper during all of those decades, and as Colorado shifted, and where do you think we're going?
I kind of like where we are at the moment, our blue island in the middle of a sea of red. Denver has always been socially liberal, so that hasn't been that much of a difference. You know, we didn't even know we were an alternative newspaper. We just thought, let's put out our newspaper and not take resumes and it'll be fun. And then we discovered there were papers like Westward around the country that had started, that have grown up from underground papers and were definitely more politically liberal. And they were alternative generally to the mainstream. And Denver was a little different because we could make fun of the News and the Post, but in general, they were not crazy right-wing Phil-Anschutz run papers. Colorado Springs, for example, had an independent weekly, which was really, really important in that town because there wasn't another voice. And now that's gone through several iterations and apparently is dead again. So you need, we're pushing our alternative stance again. We've kind of postponed it for years because once the news died, what are we alternative to? But now it's pretty clear what we're alternative to. So we're pushing it. I see Denver continuing. I think Denver will get a little more fiscally conservative, just in the sense we will not pass every single tax increase. I don't know what will happen with Vibrant Denver. Johnston's plan to parcel out more projects around the city. I think people are going to be pretty upset by the time that they get to the ballot box in November and might do a lot of no's because they're already paying out too much money around everything. So, but I think in general, Denver will remain at least a good-hearted city that's welcoming and wants to do the right thing, even if sometimes it does it in a bad way. Colorado, I think, will continue to stay blue. I mean, the Republican Party would actually have to come up with an electable statewide candidate. I don't see it happening soon. Although there are some good Republicans, they just will never put them ahead of the primary. Yeah.
What are your views of what Tabor has done to Colorado and to our city and our finances and our schools, which is nice?
We were just arguing about Tabor after we filmed Channel 12. It was a little bit surprising that they didn't get anything about Tabor out of the legislature. It's surprising and disappointing, although I think we'll see some things on the ballot. I think, to talk about a split in Colorado, people like to be able to vote for their tax increases. The rest of it is a mess that needs to be dealt with. And I don't see anyone with the political will to deal with it right now, but we have to. Especially if we're going into another budget crisis, that's going to be another $1 billion out of the budget in a special session. So all those nuances of Tabor have to be cleaned out. I think in general, Coloradans would vote for appropriate tax increases and fees. Yeah.
I think it's interesting in regard to Tabor that I think aside from maybe New Hampshire or Vermont, Colorado is the only state with such a measure in this Constitution. As I recall, about 3 or 4 years after it was passed by the voters in Colorado, a similar measure came up in Mississippi and went down 55-45. After our experience, they saw what we were going through.
You know, it's so crazy. Some of you remember back to '92 when no one thought Tabor, I should say, no one that I was sitting in a TV room with watching the returns, a lot of Democratic Denver politicos, no one thought it was going to pass. And we didn't really have the feel for what the state was thinking. Don't forget, we passed Amendment 2 that year, too. I mean, we were a really, really horrible state that year. And we're still paying for it in some ways. I mean, we've gone back in other ways. But imagine, that was '92, and we thought we were so enlightened. You know, we'd stopped the Olympics. We loved the environment. And that was a real watershed year. We're still coming back from.
Right.
Yeah.
Taking another direction, if I may. Are you addressing water issues around the state, or specifically the drought in Denver, and what people can do, or what our leaders can do?
Well, I'm doing my bit by never watering my lawn. But, in fact, I have no lawn. So, we are, in some ways, think about it, we've got 4 full-time reporters. 4 in, you know, the entire city. Denver, all the counties we try to cover. We try to do everything we can. We will sacrifice if we see somebody's doing a really good job, like Melanie Asmar, who does a great job for Chalk on education, used to be a writer of ours, so we're not going to beat Melanie, we'll just let her have that beat for now. Water is another one that is so tricky because it's not just Denver. I mean, you've got the Gross Reservoir issue right now, which was before a judge on Tuesday, I think. Will we be able to have that reservoir dealt with so we can have more water for Denver and to run into these environmental issues that everyone in Denver water thought was settled by now? So we will be following it and figuring things out. Yeah.
Does that include the increase of the energy that the data centers require?
Oh, the data centers, yeah. So the data centers, more energy, more water. If you looked, let me jump over to Excel, a really favorite topic. So Excel dropped 1/10 of its complaint calls last year. If you called Excel to complain, odds were 1 in 10 that you even got through. And that's horrible that the bills have gone up so much. And now we're going to also maybe subsidize data centers. So that's horrifying. And we will be following all of those. Sorry, yesterday we had to do the very important story that Denver was sinking, so we dropped everything for that. And also the fact that people were lighting Chromebooks on fire at the Boulder Public Schools. Have you heard this? Kids hate Chromebooks so much that they're sabotaging them. Our writers use Chromebooks, so I had 2 of them blow up their computers yesterday on purpose. So I'm dealing with that today. They can't write. So I'll tell them they can, but we'll get back to water soon. I mean, there's so many issues. What else what don't you want to read about? Solid analysis, and it's just hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. invited you here for a reason, which is because you represent fact-based journalism, and you'll take on topics that are tough topics, and thank you so much. Please carry on.
Well, thank you, we are trying.